Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today is the 39th lecture of this course. The topic of discussion today is interview method of data collection. We have already discussed about the data. We have discussed the various aspects of the data. The primary data and secondary data, they have different methods of collection. So here we are discussing the collection of primary data through the interview method of the data collection. First of all, we must clarify what is interview. Interview is verbal questioning. We question people verbally, or a respondent verbally, or a high designated person verbally. Prime Minister, presidents, ministers, they give interviews. It's a kind of verbal questioning. But as a tool of research, as a method of data collection, interview is quite different from the general interviewing with regard to its preparation, construction, and execution. This we would be discussing in this class. The difference is that research interview is prepared and executed in a systematic way. It is controlled by the researcher to avoid bias and distortion, and it is related to a specific research question for a specific purpose. So, these kind of interviews have also been described as a conversation with a purpose. The definition is too broad, very broad, to be accepted in the research field, because the purpose of interview could be therapeutic, psychiatric, selection for a job, selection for admission to a professional institution, publicity of a film actor, and so on. So, what are the functions of interview? We describe here. The first is the description. The information that we receive from the respondent gives us an insight into the nature of social reality. Since the interviewer spends some time with the respondents, he can understand or she can understand their feelings and attitudes more clearly and seek additional information wherever necessary and tries to make this information meaningful for the purpose the interview is being done. Suppose in a sociological study of management of canal water for irrigation, the respondent suggests that in a particular area, water can be provided to 400 more acres of by diverting the canal. However, if The interviewer is present. Since the interviewer is present here, so he can find what are the problems and difficulties, whether there is enough water or whether the those lands are situated in such a way that the canal water can reach over there. Maybe those lands are on a very height, and there are other problems which can be seen directly by the interviewer, and then he can form his opinion and he cannot be misled by the respondents. The second is the exploration. The interview provides insight into unexplored dimensions of the problem. Let us take the problem of exploitation of widows by in-laws or the office colleagues. It is the personal interview with the victims which would enable the interviewer to get details about widows' position in the support system and their sticking to their traditional values which make their life miserable and adjustment difficult. Or for example, in the study of problems faced by husband and wives in intercaste and intercommunity marriages, probing their attitudes, beliefs, behavior patterns in considerable depth, one can come up with interesting data about different aspects of adjustment, how they are adjusting. What are the characteristics of the interview? First, the personal communication. There is face-to-face contact, conversational exchange, and verbal interaction between the interviewer and the respondent. They are not separate by distance. They have equal status. The status of interviewer and the interview is equal. Questions are asked and responses received verbally. If information is recorded by the interviewer and not the respondent. The relationship between the interviewer and the interview, who are strangers to each other, is transitory, it's not permanent. The interview is not necessarily limited to two persons. It could involve two interviews and a group of respondents, or it could be one interviewer and two or more respondents. Further, let us discuss the types of interviews. There are many types of interviews which differ from one another in terms of structure. The interviewer's role, number of respondents involved in the interview, you see. Some types of interviews are employed in both quantitative and qualitative research, but others are used in one research type only. This table gives the brief description of the types of interview. We shall also spend some time in discussing this. The unstructured versus structured interviews. In the unstructured interviews, there are no specifications in the wording of the questions or the order of questions. The interviewer forms questions as and when required. Whatever he thinks he should ask. First, second, third questions, it is left to the interviewer. The structure of such kind of interviews are flexible being presented in the form of a guide. In simple words, in this interview, the interviewer has only the general nature of questions in mind, has no prior indication of the specific issues on which the questions are to be asked, has not ordered questions in a particular way, has no time limit also for continuing the interview. Whereas in the structured interview, it is based in the structured interview guide, which is a little different from the questionnaire. In reality, it is a set of specific points and definite questions prepared by the interviewer. It allows little freedom to make adjustments to any of its elements, such as content, wording, or alter the questions. In this interview, all dimensions, that is specifying the setting of the interview, regulating questions and range of responses, controlling the interviewers and the interview's characteristics. This kind of interview limits the facets of the problem they are regulated. Now comes the standardized versus unstandardized interviews. In standardized interviews, the answer to each question is standardized as it is determined by a set of response categories given for this purpose. The respondents are expected to choose one of the given options as the answer. For example, the alternative answers could be yes, no, do not know, agree, disagree, illiterate, less educated, highly educated, for, against, undecided, and so on. This is mainly used in quantitative research. So here the respondents are expected to choose one of the given options as the answer. Whereas in the whereas whereas in the unstandardized interview, it is the responses are left open to the respondent, and this is used mainly in qualitative research. So we have found the difference between standardized interviews and unstandardized interviews, where there are response categories which have been given, whereas in unstandardized interview, the responses are left open to the respondent. Then the unique versus panel interviews. Unique interview is one in which interviewer collects entire information in one interview. However, he is not barred from approaching the interviewer for the second time for seeking additional information. That is the unique interview, where the interviewer collects entire information in one interview. Whereas in the panel interview, the interviewer collects information from the same group of respondents 2 or more times at regular intervals. If different respondents are involved in various stages for asking the same question, it is called a trained study. So in the we have unique panel and the trained study. In the panel interview, the interviewer collected informations from the same group of respondents 2 or more times at regular intervals. However, if the Different respondents are involved in various stages for asking the same question. It is called a trained study. Focused interview. What is that? Focused interview is one which is focused on a specific topic. In this, respondents are subjected to the same experience. We are taking interviews, say, about a government policy. We can take interview regarding one of the any of the decisions of the government. We can take interview about any other phenomenon. But if the interview is limited to a specific topic, then it is focused interview. Suppose we are the interview is related to India-China relations or say India-Iran relations, then it is focused interview because it is related to only a specific topic. And in this, all respondents are subjected to the same experience. For examples, also all persons who were present in the riot are asked particular questions relating to their common experiences in this situation. The interview is thus focused on actual effects of the experience as viewed by the participants. Studying prisoners in jail about the restrictions on their freedom, work, recreation, interaction, etc. is another example of the focused interview. How the prisoners feel about their restrictions. Then we have the telephone interview. This type of interview is now common in India also and abroad also. And it is not limited only to urban areas, but to the rural areas also, as the mobile phones have become acceptable and popular in both rural and the urban areas. Newspapers, radio and TV personnel use this method more to assess public opinion on important issues. For example, reactions on the budget. So, there is telephonic interviews from various sections of the society who are affected by the budget either positively or negatively, and they provide the telephonic interview. Opinions on election results, sudden increase in petrol or cooking gas prices, communal riots in the city, increasing crime in a town, and so on. These can be normally the telephone interviews are helpful or is in fact practical kind of interview in these kind of issues. The interviews are conducted with the help of computers also, and now even in India every student and most of the educated people, they have their laptops and they have their computers, desktops. With this, they This is helpful in giving the interviews. We will be asked interviewed through the now there is WhatsApp, and there are many conversational apps through which one can give the interviews. So the computer interview is where the interview is conducted with the help of computers. What are the conditions of a successful interview? Collecting data through interview technique may be easy, yet its adequacy, reliability, and validity pose important problems. The interviewers differ in interest and skills. Respondents differ in ability and motivation, and content of interview differs in feasibility. So, what are the conditions for a successful interview? Three conditions have been pointed out for a successful interviewing. What is that? That is accessibility, understanding, and motivation. What is accessibility? For giving information, it is important that the respondent understands what is required of him, and he is also willing to provide information he possesses. So, the respondent should have the required information also and should be willing to share this also. The possibilities are that the respondent might have no information, or he might have forgotten some fact, or he could be under emotional stress and therefore unable to give information, or the question is so framed that he cannot answer it. So these issues are some issues which has to be taken care of in this accessibility condition. Then the understanding. The respondent sometimes is not able to understand what is expected of him unless he understands the significance of research, survey, the extent of interview demands and concepts and the terms used, the nature of answers which the interviewer expects from him. His answers might be off the point. So, basically, this is about the respondent's qualification. He should be qualified enough to understand the significance of research. He should be qualified enough to understand the extent of interview demand. He should be qualified enough to understand the concepts and terms used, and he should understand enough the nature of answers which interviewer expects from him. Otherwise, his answers might be off the point. If suppose we are doing a survey of, say, buffaloes or goats, and we go to certain persons, certain respondents who have never seen a goat or never reared a buffalo, then naturally the answers might be off the point. Motivation. The respondent needs to be motivated not only for giving information, but also for giving accurate information. the fear of consequences, embarrassment at ignorance, being suspicious about the interviewer, and dislike of the subject are some of the factors which decrease the level of respondents' motivation. If we go on asking about the behavior of, say, police, there would be very few people who would be able to criticize. If we go on asking questions on mafias, so there would be very few persons would be willing to answer. They will be hardly motivated because of the fear and dislike of the subject. They should decrease the respondent's motivation to cooperate with the interviewer, and so the interviewer cannot reach the depth of the respondent because he is not motivated. Besides the above mentioned three factors, there are others also which affect the success of an interview. These are mainly related to the interviewer, and this has been given in the adjoining table. Which gives in detail the model for successful interview. Then what is the process? The training to the interviewer or the process of training implies explaining the interviewer the process of conducting the interview in a number of stages. Each stage including certain tasks. These are as such. The researcher should be fully explained what the study is all about. What are the objectives of the study and what aspects of the theme are to be focused. Suppose the researcher is working on India-Jordan relations and he wants to interview the Jordanian ambassador to India. Then the researcher must be explained the about the study and the objectives of the study and what themes, what points he has to focus in doing the interview of the Jordanian ambassador. The sample members, that is the respondents, are to be selected and located. And of course, the appointment has to be taken from the respondents before approaching him for interview. Otherwise, it is very difficult to catch hold of the respondents. Then manipulate the situation of the interview in such a way that only respondent is available at the place of interview and others leave the place willingly. Because if we are interviewing in a crowd or before many people, the respondent may feel restricted about revealing his knowledge in the interview or giving he may be feeling restricted in giving many points or many aspects which are controversial or which he does not think proper. to give before many people. The respondents are to be given the approximate time of the interview. For how long? Half an hour, 1 hour, 10 minutes. Because the respondents have not unlimited time. The interview has to be begun by stating the organization the interviewer represents and explaining how he was, that is, the respondent was selected for the interview. Appear with an attitude so that the respondent feels free to express his views. And the researcher or the interviewer has to ask the questions phrased in an impartial way. He is to increase the respondent's motivation to cooperate. That is his task. And reassure the respondent of keeping his identity a secret if it requires. Training the interviewer with all applicable questions have to be asked in a given order. The merits of the interview method is explained below. What is that? Quick information. The information is obtained quickly. There is no time lag. The interviewer and the respondent finish the exchange of or collecting of the information within a certain period of time, so it is obtained quickly. Proper interpretation, that is, the respondents interpret the questions properly. Flexibility, it permits flexibility in questioning. That is, the interviewer can has always the autonomy of asking the questions. That is flexibility. Checking validity, the validity of the information can be readily checked. And control, exercising control on the context of questions and answers is possible in this method of data collection. What are the advantages? The advantages are that the response rate is very high because everything is fixed. So, the respondent is the appointment has already been taken from the respondent. He is a known person and the time is fixed. So the responses are high. In-depth probing is possible. Respondent's confidence can be sought through personal rapport. Interviewer can also explain difficult terms and remove confusion and misunderstanding because they are sitting together. They are not apart. Administration is also easy because respondents are not required to be educated or handle long questionnaires because they do not have to go through the questionnaires and then react. No, they are sitting together and it is a verbal conversation. Interviewer interviewer gets opportunity to observe respondents' non-verbal behavior, his postures, facial expressions. These are also caught by the interviewer in the interview method of data collection. And of course, the identity of the respondent is known. Since all questions are asked by the interviewers and these are asked by the respondents, completeness of the interview is guaranteed in most of the times. Of course, there are some limitations also. What are these? The interviewees can hide information or give wrong information because of fear of identity. We can go to interview, say, any mafia person or criminal person, or say a person who has been given life imprisonment. So since he is identified and because of the fear of identity, it may not be, he may in fact hide information or give wrong information also. Interviews are costlier and time consuming than questionnaires. The nature and extent of responses depends upon interview's mood. If he is tired, he will be distracted. If he is in a hurry, he will try to dispose of the interviewer quickly. That is one of the demerits or limitations. There could be variability in responses with different interviewers, particularly when interview is unstructured. So, we have discussed all the aspects of the interview method of data collection, what a interview method is, how it is done, what are its requirements, what are the types of interview method, what are its advantages, what are its limitations. So, we have in fact gone through or discussed all the aspects of interview method of the data collection. However, there are many aspects which become clear to us when we involve ourselves in practice in collecting the data through the interview method, because there are many things which are given in the book, which are given in the lectures of the teachers, but the reality or the situation faced by the interviewers at the time of implementing this interview gives him the experience that a lecture or a reading of a chapter in the book cannot give. And I am sure many of you will be interviewing or collecting the data through the interview method. Wish you good luck. I stop here and thank you very much.